Thank you all for coming. My name is Kurt Johnson with the Climate Center. We are a California-based environmental NGO. We're the only California NGO focused exclusively on climate policy. We're here today to talk about something that I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about in future years. California has historically been on the cutting edge of leading lots of global revolutions. We all have a phone in our pocket that says designed in California, made in China. California is the birthplace of the wind industry, the electric vehicle industry. Remember back in 2006 and 7, a guy made a movie called Who Killed the Electric Car? Well, Elon Musk killed the electric car along with a lot of others. There's a lot of innovation that's coming out of California. In solar, there's a lot of the standards for the global solar industry came out of California. 16 years ago, I worked on a project initiated by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he had a vision. He said, you know what? We want to build 1 million solar roofs in California. At the time, there were about 20,000. And here we are, 16 years later, we have 1.3 million solar roofs. We have 13 gigawatts of solar. The electric vehicle industry has exploded. What we're here to talk about today is integrating the massive number of rooftop solar we have in California with the rapidly accelerating penetration of electric vehicles to build the grid for the future. What we can see forward is a future world where millions of distributed rooftop solar is connected to millions of electric vehicles. And it's working every day to both provide reliability for the broader grid, taking all the excess daytime solar, shifting it to the evening. And it's also available as a resilience asset. So as climate change extremes threaten the grid, there will be distributed local energy in every community able to withstand whatever climate change throws at us. So we are here today to hear from a couple speakers from California to talk about what that looks like. There's a multiplicity of agencies in California that set energy policy, the two most important of which are the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utilities Commission. So without further ado, we will start with our first speaker, Siva Gunda, Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission. Siva?
Sound check, can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. So thank you, Kurt, and thank you, Ellie, for organizing and hosting this event and inviting me and Cliff to join you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here alongside Cliff, who's both my mentor and a colleague now. So I just want to start with framing what our agency, the California Energy Commission, does, the climate policy in California, and then go into the role of the vehicle to grid, and specifically the electric vehicle integration into the grid as a third element. So the California Energy Commission that I work for is the state's premier policy and planning agency with 4 foundational things. One is gathering data and being the repository for data that will allow for energy transition in California. The second is we have some regulatory functions. We cite new power plants, but we also look at building codes and standards, especially the efficiency codes. We also do a lot of modeling and planning and policy recommendations for the state. And finally, the California Energy Commission is the preferred or stated California clean energy investment vehicle. So the Energy Commission has approximately $10 billion to deploy for the clean energy transition over the next 10 years. An important element of the overarching climate policy in California is predicated on having a large swath of the economy electrified. Those include small residential and commercial buildings. It includes a large swath of the transportation, which is about 80%, which includes all the light-duty vehicles to be electrified, but then underpinned with a clean electric grid So between those three sectors, the light duty transportation sector, the building sector, and the electric grid sector, you're looking at about 75% of the emissions of California. So today we're going to talk about 50% of that, which is the vehicles here. As you see here on this slide, the EVs are growing very rapidly. And what you have here on the y-axis is the megawatts of capacity that's actually on the wheels. So an important element of greening the grid requires a lot of storage, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So as you look at it, we're roughly approximately 20 to 30,000 megawatts today in global capacity. As you look forward by 2030, you're looking at 180,000 megawatts of storage capacity on the wheels projected to be a part of the grid modernization effort. So California, okay, let me see. Okay, so the EV adoption in California specifically is a success story. We have some very strong policies. By 2035, year 2035, all new passenger vehicles in California have to be electric. So that's the goal. So as you look at the trajectory for that, we need to meet approximately 8 million vehicles by 2030. We are right now at 1.3 million cumulative sales in California and approximately 39% of US share of the market. A statistic to note is in the last third quarter of 2022, California's new sales, approximately 18% of all new LDV sales were electric vehicles. And in some of the regions in California, especially where the Silicon Valley is, the Bay Area, we reached almost 30% of all new vehicle sales are electric right now. In terms of another complementary element, as Kurt spoke earlier, is the rooftop industry in California. So we've already reached over 1 million rooftops with PV, and it accounts for roughly 11.6 gigawatts. This is just behind the meter solar. And as you look at the bulk side grid, that's another 15 gigawatts. So together in California, we have over 25 gigawatts of solar currently serving the load in California. The importance of this is that majority of the energy is in the middle of the day. As most of you know, as we think about the electric grid of the future, and as you put more and more solar on the grid, you're looking at a large amount of energy in the middle of the day. And right as the evening comes in, especially in California, where it's still hot, we run our air conditionings all the way into 8 p.m., you're looking at the solar dropping down, but still the load, electric load, will be very high, especially as you think about electrifying more and more buildings. So it's an important element of how to then have the EVs support the reduction in the energy production by using the energy from the vehicles. As I mentioned, this is the big number for us. We're looking at about 8 million vehicles by 2030 on the grid in California. With just 1 million vehicles today in California, we have 10 gigs of storage on the wheels in California. And the total peak load in California is about 60 gigs. As we go through 2030, the overarching peak load in California is going to be about 80 gigawatts. And if we really do meet 8 million vehicles by 2030, you're looking at pretty much 80 gigs of storage on the wheels. So it'll be an incredible asset to the grid to really support those times when the solar is going down. So that all brings us to the bidirectionality. It's an important element for multiple reasons. As we think through the storage aspect in California, we're in the middle of really looking at the impact of climate change. So when we look at climate change in California, we have 3 fronts that we are dealing with. One, we have high heat events. So every summer, it's becoming more and more normal for us to have extreme temperatures for a prolonged amount of time, really increasing the amount of electric load in California. So that's an important element. Second, on the supply side, we are losing a lot of hydro because of drought. So that's the combination of heat and drought. And finally, in the western side of the United States, where California is, we have wildfires. So when you talk about fires, you're looking at knocking out power lines. You could potentially be taking out thermal generation that's somewhere in a fire area, but you also look at the effect of smoke. When you have a lot of smoke, the PV production goes down. So all those challenges combine high demand and high volatility on the supply side as well. So together, when you look at an incident like that, the perfect solution, and as Kurt mentioned, it's a revolutionary element of the future of the electric grid, is how do you use the vehicles to really support that volatility and get us through that energy transition. So I think when we think about the vehicles as a grid support, you have at least three aspects of that. One is making sure you're charging the vehicles when you have excess amount of energy. So that's one element of how the vehicles actually can help you. They can be charged in the middle of the day. Second, you could potentially look at islanding a house, for example, or a campus, right? So it's a smaller scale. You're looking at a community scale level of islanding your entire load onto vehicles, whether it might be a single car supporting a house, or you're looking at a bunch of electric vehicles, electric buses together, isolating a campus, right? And the third element is how do you then take the excess energy and put it back to the grid to support the overarching grid? So that's the story of California. That's where we're going. We have high ambitions for vehicle electrification, and we think it's an important element of the energy transition in terms of the clean grid, which then underpins our carbon neutrality goals and overall climate goals. With that, I would welcome my colleague Cliff Rechtschaffen to go through the rest of the slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me just go over why, expand what Commissioner Gunda said and emphasize why vehicle to grid is such a game changer, why it's a unicorn, why it does things that nothing else can do. So as Commissioner Gunda says, it can provide backup power during outages, whether they're caused by wildfires from climate change or other events. It can feed power back to the grid at the time of our greatest need. And along the way, it can avoid the need for expensive transmission or distribution upgrades. It can provide what we call ancillary services. It can help provide the kinds of services to help smooth out the flow of electricity that are necessary to keep frequency and voltage in line, keep our system running well. It can do all that. And it can also greatly reduce the costs of owning an electric vehicle. Right now, it's still more expensive to own an electric vehicle than an internal combustion engine. That's going to change very soon. But in any case, if you as the consumer are sending power back to the grid, you can make money. You can earn an income stream, so that can really help reduce the cost of ownership for an electric vehicle. So we can send power back, as this slide indicates, to an appliance, to your home, to the neighborhood, to a school, or to the grid itself. This just gives you some example of the potential of the energy in electric vehicles. We heard a little bit already about that. We have a goal of 8 million vehicles, as Commissioner Gunda said, by 2030. And if even a portion of that were bidirectional, we could power all of our homes in California. So there's enormous potential in the batteries of our cars. What are we doing to make this revolution happen? It's not here yet, but we're on the cusp. It's one of the things that people have been saying, it's just another couple of years, it's just another couple of years. Well, it's here now. It's about to happen. One of the biggest reasons is that the auto manufacturers are embracing this technology. They see it as a way to enhance their sales and to make EV adoption more palatable. I don't know how many of you saw the U.S. Super Bowl, the biggest event of our sports season. Well, our car companies were advertising the ability of pickup trucks to provide backup power for construction or tailgating, partying events. So California is doing quite a bit. We're in experimentation stage, but we're going to be beyond that very soon. So to give you a couple of examples, we have a program funded by Commissioner Gunda's agency that allows school buses to aggregate their batteries and to provide backup power to the grid. And we called on a school district in the San Diego area to do that with a half dozen school buses during a recent event over the summer when we were desperately searching for energy to deal with a heat wave. And those buses provided about 650 kilowatt hours of energy. And other school districts are also lining up to do similar programs. That district, in fact, hopes to convert its entire fleet of buses to be bidirectional. In Northern California, there's a transit district that's partnering with a public library in Oakland to use electric buses to provide air conditioning and air filtration services. The goal here is that local residents can come to the library and use it as resource centers, cooling centers, safe haven when there's wildfires or it's making outdoor air quality unhealthy to breathe. Importantly, also, my agency, which regulates the rates and tariffs of private utilities, just approved an export rate for commercial electric vehicle customers. It's the first of its kind anywhere in the country and will allow large electric vehicle customers to feed power back to the grid and be compensated. And to be compensated not just during these emergency events that I mentioned with the San Diego school bus situation, where they were compensated because it was an emergency and we needed the resources, the demand response resources right away, but at all times. And we are working to develop a universal dynamic rate for both exporting and importing in an ongoing regulatory proceeding that would be available to all customers. Our hope is that that kind of market signal, that dynamic universal market signal, will provide the certainty that customers need and businesses need to make investments so they know, regardless of what technology they have, they can be compensated. And this should provide a good, strong market signal to grid technology. We are investing billions of dollars towards zero emission infrastructure over the next several years, and that includes bidirectional charging. Siva's agency, the Energy Commission, has been a strong proponent of having bidirectional ready cars if they're publicly funded. That's going to be a very important development. On the market today, there are already 9 bidirectional passenger vehicles. I'm going to highlight one. There's the Ford Lightning. That is the electric version of the Ford F-150 pickup truck. That was the one I mentioned that was advertised in the Super Bowl. That is the leading car. That car is the most popular vehicle. It's a pickup truck, but it's the most popular vehicle, the highest selling vehicle in the country. And Ford has tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people interested in purchasing that electric pickup truck. As I mentioned, all publicly funded electric school buses in California I didn't mention that, but all publicly funded school buses in California, electric school buses, are bidirectionally capable right now. The technology exists. It's time to scale. It's not universally applicable. There's some heavy-duty vehicle trucks and specialized vehicles. They've been slow to create commercially available EV options. There's some charging stations that are not bidirectionally capable. Those are challenges we'll have to overcome. But let me conclude with one very encouraging item to reiterate what I said before. In the past, car companies were reluctant to embrace this technology. They wouldn't warrant their batteries They were worried about their batteries being used for providing power as opposed to running their cars. That's changed. They are now embracing this technology. Most prominently and most recently, Tesla, the leading EV manufacturer in the world, had resisted vehicle-to-grid technology. It's now planning to make new vehicles that are vehicle-to-grid capable. That announcement's coming soon. You heard it here first.
Thank you, Commissioner Rechtschaffen. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. Sure, I think there's a person with a microphone here. We can't hear you. There, come on up.
Thank you for that. So my question is like, is the concept of V2ZI reliable only for the backup option or like constant one? If constant one, since some people are relying on level 1 or level 2 charging overnight, how is that gonna, is that a challenge or how are we gonna solve that problem? Does that make sense?
I believe the question is it, well, I couldn't hear the complete question, but part of it is it just for backup or is it for a regular energy supply, and how does it work with people charging overnight? Is that the fair question? The answer is both. Batteries can provide a steady source of energy to meet some of the needs we have because we rely on intermittent power. So during the time of our greatest need, when our solar resources, when the sun goes down, batteries can provide thousands of megawatts of energy potentially as a regular energy supply, as well as providing backup power in times of great need. The good thing about vehicles is most of the time people don't drive them. They're just sitting in a driveway or a workplace not used. So people are very flexible in when they charge their vehicle. And if we have the right pricing structures in place, they can be tailored to promote the kind of grid needs that we want to see promoted.
Yeah, just to add, I think to Commissioner Rechtschaffen's point, in an average vehicle in California typically is stationary 95% of its time. So 95%. So that's an important stat in terms of its utility. And as Commissioner here mentioned, we're looking at the consumer preference on how much they are okay discharging the batteries. So the early indication is up to 20% of actual discharge of the vehicle is not something that makes them anxious, right? Because at the end of the day, they have to be able to drive. So the first 20% most probably will play into shaping the grid. And the rest of it, how far do we want to go into a backup mode, is something that still will be worked out.
Come on up. Or if we can get the microphone to work.
Thank you. It's Masato Kimura, Japanese journalist. So if you want to scale up the production capacity of EV, you need a capacity of make batteries. And but battery needs rare metal, and I think it is very difficult to scale up the production of batteries. And second question is, Japanese car maker Toyota still cling to hybrid a little bit, and so you think Toyota could be loser in the near future?
Yeah, I can frame the question. So you're talking about if we are going to scale the electric vehicles. You're specifically talking about how fast we can scale, given the challenges on the battery side, supply side. So yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 points, and I would like Commissioner Rechtschaffen to add to it. I think the first thing is if we are going to have lithium as the only storage technology to do both the bulk grid and the transportation, it'll be hard. So I think the diversification of the chemistries is important. On the grid side, we're beginning to see them. So the more and more the lithium technologies will help with the transportation side. But you absolutely make an important point. I think lithium is an important element in scaling.
There are emerging battery alternatives to lithium that we're on the verge of seeing accelerated, and that will be very helpful to allowing the large-scale production of EVs.
Looks like we have one final question. We got to wrap.
So cars are not always parked at home. Are you looking at bidirectional charging stations, for example, when the car is parked in a shopping center or school or whatever?
Absolutely. The vision is to have them workplace, public stations, homes, everywhere.
Thanks, everyone.